So thank you to the participant as well. And yeah, Nate Summers, please, if you don't mind, we'd like you to introduce yourself.
Yeah, certainly. Hi, good morning, everybody. Or afternoon, I guess. My name is Nate Summers.
I
I'm
don't
an
know if
enterprise
you guys can hear Nate Summers well, because I don't.
test. Oh no.
Can't hear him.
Okay.
I guess it's be
One
the
second.
microphone. Must be the microphone.
Yeah, let me try resetting my headset. Oh,
All right.
I know what it is.
I'm going to the next person while Nate is figure out the microphone.
Check.
And perfect. It's better now. You can go on.
Yeah. I had my headset on backwards, turns
Ah,
out.
perfect.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm Nate Summers. I'm an enterprise applications developer in IT here at the University of Idaho. So basically, I build and maintain these software systems that keep the university running. Um, and basically, everything I do outside of meetings, like writing code or drafting docs or like planning for our projects, involves AI. So, yeah, I'm here to talk about it, not necessarily in theory, but my everyday use.
Thank you, Nate. Thank you for being here today. And now I'm going to go over to Shan Butterfield.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sean Butterfield. I'm the director of the Lionel Hampton School of Music. Jokingly, often call myself a recovering trumpet professor. In as far as if since Nate has already kind of shared a little bit about his usage of AI, this is a real hot button topic amongst our students in particular, and so I'm excited to be here talking about it. I do use it regularly through daily tasks. I'm a tech enjoyer, I would say, in all walks of life. So I use this actually quite a bit, and it's helped me get into coding and database management, all sorts of stuff. So mainly a musician, but generally using the technology a lot.
That's perfect. And I'm going to hand over to Katrina.
Hi, I'm Kat Eichner. I'm an associate professor over in anthropology. I am coming at this from concerns about the social implications of AI use. And again, as an educator, just my experiences with it, I also am a disabled scholar. And so I have been using aspects of AI for a long time as a student, but not necessarily the generative AI that I think a lot of us are really concerned about. So I'm certainly coming not fully from an advocacy standpoint on this panel.
I appreciate that. Then I'm going to Ben Hunter.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ben Hunter, the Dean of Libraries. I've led the AI working group. We authored the university's AI white paper that came out last spring. Hopefully, some of you saw that. I'm currently the AI champion for the strategic plan, leading the AI strategic plan execution group and the AI literacy task force. I think AI is exciting. I think it's terrifying. I think there's huge potential, huge risk. My role is not to advocate for AI, but to advocate for understanding AI. I'm in favor of a nuanced and critical approach and not wholesale resistance or adoption. So that's me.
Perfect. We have you here today as well. And I'm going over to Alice Kokenge, to Alice.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Elise Kokenge. I'm an assistant research professor in the College of Natural Resources, and I also serve as a director of graduate studies. I am I would say a novice AI user. I lean on AI in ways to help my professional workflow, administrative workflow. I am striving for understanding because similar to Ben, without as much experience, there's a lot of amazing creative and innovative things that AI can be used for. But I also feel that there's a slippery slope of some pretty destructive things that I see that can be detrimental to particularly education. I'm interested in learning more from a creative standpoint as well as from making environmentally sound decisions. So thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you to be here as well. And I'm going over to Steve.
Hello everyone, this is Steve. My pleasure to be here, and I'm the chair, of the computer science department, and I'm aware, of all the issues. The panelists talk about the challenges with the AI. For me, I think AI means opportunities, and the CS department we have spent lots of time to talking about the new curriculums on AI and new programs on the AI. And we are in the process to create two new degree programs. One is a master's degree in artificial intelligence, and another one is a Bachelor of Science in Artificial Intelligence. At the same time, and we have lots of discussion about how to use the AI to transform and strengthen our existing degree program, such as computer science and cybersecurity. And so I do believe that AI brings lots of opportunities, so we can do better and help our students.
Perfect. Thank you. And I'm going over to Terence.
Hello. I'm a faculty member in computer science. My sort of research area is AI, although a lot of it is non-generative AI techniques as well as our new generative AI. And again, sort of faced with the issue of how do we teach our students to use these tools, which we definitely, at least in computer science, have to do without undermining their learning the fundamental skills that they really need. And then also interested and worried about the implications for society as a whole.
Thank you. And I'm going to Ying Hong as our last panelist to introduce ourselves.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Hong Cheah. I'm an assistant professor of instructional technology in the Department of Curriculum and Instruction. And I'm based on Moscow campus. So overall, my research focus on investigating and developing educators' technology practices to empower students as digital learners. So since generative AI, especially, ChatGPT, entered the public sphere in late 2022. So I started to develop a focus research interest in this area by studying how teachers justify and use AI in both intervention and non-intervention settings. So and in complement to that, I also offer courses to promote AI literacy at both the undergraduate and graduate levels and provide professional development for K-12 teachers. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, and thank you to our amazing panelists for your wonderful introduction and also for the wonderful work you are doing. So now let's go over to some question. And here I have a question, but before the question, I like to observe that training and running large AI models require significant electricity and water for cooling data centers. At the same time, AI is also being used to optimize energy system, reduce waste, and accelerate climate research. Universities often sit at the intersection of sustainability, commitments, and higher performance computing needs. And my question now for my panelists, which are going to be for this first question, Katrina, Elise, and Steve, is how should higher education weigh the environmental cost of AI against its potential to help solve sustainability challenges, and where should institutions draw the line? And this question is going to be also available in the comments. So we can go with Katrina, Elise, then Steve.
First, but I think for me, when I think about environmental sustainability, my question immediately goes to not just what is it doing to our natural resources, but what is it doing to humans, and who is suffering the highest amount of impact from environmentally unsustainable practices. While again, the prompt points out that universities can use AI to help solve problems within the climate crisis, the reality is that the statistics are showing us that data centers are incredibly polluting. So it takes somewhere around about 5 million gallons daily to run a large data center. That's about the same usage of 10,000 to 50,000 people in terms of water. That water is not then going back into our watershed. It's literally evaporating. You have to use clean, processed water. And so all of the energy that goes into cleaning and processing that water needs to be of concern. Talk about just the amount of land that is impacted by the construction and use of data centers. And that's, again, not just the footprint itself, that's all of the infrastructure to get the power lines and power grids to the data centers. And then what we're also seeing is that quite literally, because of the amounts of electricity these data centers utilize, somewhere around 176 terawatt hours of electricity in 2023 alone, and that number is only going up. It's estimated to triple by 2028. What we are seeing is that those data centers are using emergency on-site diesel generators, which have the highest pollution rate of any type of resource or power resource that we could be using for these data centers. And that then just means higher rates of air pollution, which is then affecting our most vulnerable populations, underage children, the elderly, those who are already disabled. We also need to think about where data centers are being located. They are being located oftentimes in underprivileged neighborhoods or very close to underprivileged neighborhoods. So again, those people who are most vulnerable are the ones bearing the brunt of the environmental impact of these data centers. And even when they are being put in, quote, areas of low impact because of low population, we're settler colonialism, man, like we're taking over oftentimes landscapes that are sacred landscapes to continue to propel the development of these centers. So for me, I think the things we need to be thinking about is that environmental cost, again, isn't only about the impact to our natural environment. There's a very, very real human cost to running these data centers. And frankly, it does appear that there's a potential bubble of the level of growth that we are seeing is just not sustainable.
I appreciate that, Katrina. I'm going to ask the same question to Elise and Steve. You feel free also to ask the same question. It doesn't matter the order. If you want to go first, it's all right.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to express my gratitude for Katrina. Thanks for going first. That's delightful. And to build on your information, I do want to state that I find it wonderfully ironic that a tool that is so powerful to be able to help address the challenges of climate change is in and of itself exacerbating and expediting the challenges we see with climate change. I feel like in CNR, we've done a lot of data collection with our students to understand how students are engaging with the concept of AI, and the environmental impact is of high concern, both at the human level and at the natural level, to Katrina's points. And so I think to the question of how does the university weigh the costs and draw the line, I really think transparency is going to be a tool that is deeply needed so that individuals can understand not only the translation of costs between what the institution is leveraging for its AI use in its research and its professional functions, but also how does that scale down to the student use level, to giving students tools to understand you're using AI to ask this question that you could very well be using Google or the library. So giving individuals tools to understand their level of impact, and then encouraging the institution to have some level of accountability to be not only conducting research on the level of the institutional impact of leveraging these resources, but then some kind of action and maybe social responsibility to compensate in those ways that can mitigate some of the impact of those actions. I think by and large, it's helping educate all colleagues across the campus, students, faculty, staff, on best used practices and making those very prominent and public, along with continuing to engage in conversations like this.
Appreciate that. And Steve?
I think for me, I think indeed we all enjoy the power of the AI, and at the same time, so we also worry about some of the environmental costs of AI, such as sustainability issues there. For higher education, I do not see a contradiction between embracing AI and working to address those challenges. So in my view, I believe that continued innovation in education and research is very critical to resolve some of the issues we talked about earlier. For example, the environmental cost and also the sustainability issues. And we should refine how we teach and better prepare students by leveraging those AI tools. But at the same time, we also want to conduct the research to address the technical, the ethical, and also the sustainability challenges associated with artificial intelligence. So to be honest, I'm optimistic about resolving some of the challenges where we are facing today in the AI technologies. So one of the good examples I wanted to provide here is the evolution of the microprocessors, including CPU, GPUs, and TPUs, tensor process units. So the GPU was first released in the 1999, and it has since been widely used to support AI because of its highly parallel architecture. Where GPUs still dominate much of today's AI computing, but companies such as Google, they have also developed specialized hardware like a TPU to better support deep learning workloads. So TPU typically is doing a better job, it consumes less energy, it's more energy efficient for some of the large scale AI training and inference and so on. So in addition, most generative AI systems right now, it rely on the transformer-based architecture that are computationally intensive to train and deploy at scale. But I believe that there will be continued improvements in model design and algorithm, and that may help make the AI system more energy efficient over the time as well. So overall, I believe that innovation and also advanced technology will help resolve some of the sustainability issues we are facing today in AI.
Thank you so much for this. And we know that AI tools can dramatically improve access for students with disability, language barriers, or limited academic preparation. However, access to high quality AI tools and also reliable internet and strong AI literacy is uneven, for example. And AI systems can reflect biases present in their data training, mainly when people are training the data in AI. And my next question to Ying Han, Nate, Elise, and Katrina is, does AI actually level the playing field for students, or does it risk widening gaps? This is my next question for you, and I'm going to also share it on the chat. And we can start with Ying Han on this question. Does AI actually level the playing field for students, or does it risk widening gaps?
Yeah, I think this is actually a very difficult question because personally, I see it like manifest in both directions. So as you can see, like as what you mentioned, right, the 24/7 availability, as long as you can have reliable internet access, and also how to like being online with the online skills and open an account. Actually, you are able like to have your students like the access to the mentor, like or ever they can like directly communicate and provide learning support for the students in multimodal ways of communication, right? Through text or even audio, or like you can provide with an image and then it can communicate with you in a variety of ways. But we also can think about like, does it really the end of the story? Because like from here we see that actually know how to use it doesn't mean that we can use it like in a way that's effective and also ethically. So I think and in that way is actually very obvious, especially, and maybe I relate back to a case which the Pew Research Center has surveyed those students like from different ethnicity and socioeconomic backgrounds in terms of their use of technology in general during that time before like generative AI becomes so popular, and they observe that's like kind of a patterns like being those from minority groups or from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, they use technology in ways that it's just a consumer and in a very passive, just like viewing TikTok video or viewing other people's posts. But in the on a different, like those privileged group of students, they have better backgrounds. They kind of like use technology in a creative way and to support their learning or support their creation, online digital creation. So this suggests that actually when we talk about the use, the asset is not just the only factor, because even asset by itself, right? It also like create the gaps in which like if I don't have the money to subscribe it, I only use the free version of ChatGPT, for example, versus that I can like spend every month for $20 in using it. So that will create the barriers in order to access to the high quality like kind of interaction and high quality AI models as well. So, and the other part is, so when it comes to the use with AI, so just now I mentioned that I actually try to pilot with my students and try to observe how they communicate with AI. And I figure out that even I teach them like prompt engineering, so they know how to like explicitly like mention their questions or even like provide examples, effectively communicate with it. But in terms of more critical use of it, that's the part that we need to teach about more and how we can scaffold for that, so that it depends on how we are going to do in order to have the AI leveling the playing field rather than widening the gaps. So this is something that from my experience.
Find it very helpful, and I'm going to hand over also the word to Nate Summers on the same question.
Yeah, thank you. So let me give you a little background here, just so you understand my perspective and my biases, because they might be a little different than some of the other people on this panel. I don't have a college degree. I'm probably the only person on this panel who doesn't. I'm making an assumption here, of course. But I'm counting on it to level the playing field for me, right? As someone without a degree, as I I've learned by doing and by reading and just through the information on the internet and now through AI. People who know how to ask precise questions and know how they learn are going to be able to accelerate. I think like any technology or anything, right? People are different. We all interact with it differently. We learn differently. And that absolutely affects the outcomes. So I think it can equalize a bit, certainly, right? Like I'm learning much faster than I have been able to in the past and able to move faster on projects. I do want to say that there is an equity problem. I don't know how to solve it for anybody but myself right now. And I do that by spending money on, my own access to AI. I think there is a larger problem we need to solve here, though. I don't know how, though. Oh, I can see you speaking, but we can't hear you.
I was on mute. Sorry for that. And I was saying, like, I appreciate your perspective on it. And I'm going to hand over the same question to Elise once again to tell us a little bit more about it.
Yeah, thank you. I think it depends. It really depends on access. It depends on intent. It depends on what the individual is trying to get done, what their overarching goal is. I do want to call attention across the digital divide to the populations that to this point hitherto have not had access to computers and the web. And so I think globally, I'm concerned about what this is going to do in widening that larger gap. But within an institutional setting here at the University of Idaho, I think that accessibility to the free tools can be leveraged for students in a lot of wonderful ways. With our graduate students who English is not their first language, I have heard wonderful stories about how comforting and beneficial it is for them to have an unbiased 24/7 access point to understand the differences in maybe cultural breakdown. One student said it very succinctly, and I do all of my writing, but sometimes my English isn't coming. And so it's very nice to have that additional resource that you can intend. You want the learning for self. You are here to get a degree so that you can develop your brain and your skills. And so someone coming at AI with that intention is able to leverage the tool in a way that accelerates their growth, to Nate's point, that can really foster that individual development. I mean, AI is a fantastic tool to engage with curiosity and to accelerate access to information that might be obfuscated because you're nascent in a topic and you don't know exactly what questions to ask. And so those additional prompts that AI is helping to connect the nodes of information, extraordinarily beneficial. But graduate students have also expressed a frustration with having a lack of how to use AI well instruction in any formative or formatted environment. So they want to use it, they are using it. There is a lot of concern on how do I do this well based on what my desired outcomes are. And I think that a way to bridge that gap is to help students and people in general understand, what is your goal? What are you trying to do? And how do you use AI in a way that aligns with the values of that outcome for self? Yeah.
Appreciate that. And I'm going to hand over the word to the same question to Katrina.
So I come at this from kind of two different perspectives. One of them is myself as a disabled scholar. Like, I've been using transcription software since the early 2000s. There are certainly aspects of AI tools that I think absolutely can help lower the playing or even out the playing field and lower barriers to certain populations of students. At the same time, I'll give you a really real scenario. We're all being called, all the faculty are being called to make our Canvas websites accessible right now. And one of the ways we're doing that is using an AI tool that is tracking how accessible is your Canvas web page. One of the things that I've come across is that I make visual syllabi as a form of accessible pedagogy that allows for students who potentially get information more visually anyway to excel. And so the use of color is actually one of the things that gets flagged by one of the accessibility trackers. And so we are privileging normative modes of disability, which is very interesting to me, using these tools. And I certainly think like it's just one scenario, but it's certainly something that I have personally noticed, that what is actually of benefit to me as a disabled scholar would not be of benefit to somebody who needed to use a different type of accessibility software. And AI tools are saying, well, here's basically the law of averages, right? It's aggregating responses to find the most common answer for how do we make something accessible. And that's not always necessarily going to be best practice or serve the most vulnerable communities or serve the entirety of the vulnerable community. So I do think that's something that we need to take into consideration. The other thing, just when biases came up, again, I have to think about this at a human level. Studies have shown, again, that about 83% of AI models, of a study of 550 different ones of them, that they are very, very high risk for bias, and be that racial bias, gender bias in just their output. And again, this is because we're talking about a law of averages and because these are commercial entities. Shareholders are helping determine what the outputs are of AI models. So when we have students using what we know to be a bias tool to potentially solve social problems or solve, like these larger questions about how do we improve the world that we live in, we have to acknowledge that just because a tool is telling us this might be the best solution, or this might be the one way to look at this particular issue, we are not getting a full nuanced picture. And so I just think that we need to be really aware the majority of AI models are developed by white, cis, hetero men in privileged class positions. And that is certainly going to dictate the output that we get.
Appreciate that. And I'd like also to invite the participants to ask questions on the comments. Feel free to write your questions, and I'm going to be reading them, and also our panelists are going to be willing to answer your questions. So participate by asking any questions or providing any comments about the topic, AI, apocalypse, or utopia. So let's go over to the third question. And we know that AI can support learning, and you said it very well. You all said it very well by providing feedback, explanation, and practice opportunities on demand. And it can also reduce time spent on routine tasks. However, here's the take. There is a real concern that over-reliance on AI may weaken critical thinking, writing, or problem-solving skills if expectations aren't redesigned. For example, there is this tool that came up, Ask an AI, that can do tasks in Canvas for students, for example. And my questions to Shan, to Yinghong, and Katrina is, how do we tell the difference between AI that supports learning and AI that quietly replaces the learning that we care most about? What are the best practices for using AI for learning? And I'm going to start this question with Shan.
Thank you. So I will start by saying, for me, I'm coming at this question more at the back half of this, is what are best practices? And primarily sharing a lot of the conversations I'm having with colleagues and how this affects us. And so I think we can all acknowledge that students are using this and using it in a lot of ways, and sometimes very creative, sometimes unethical. And so for us, like, the big conversation that has evolved has focused primarily around how this is going to affect our curriculum in the future, right? And so whether that means if you're teaching a music history course and you've always used essays, well, there's a huge impact here, all the way to the new apps and ways this is addressing and causing some havoc in composition and music performance and these kinds of things. And so for us, the conversation we're trying to center around is, if we accept the inevitability of AI being present for the rest of our lives, which seems like a likely thing. I don't feel this is going to be put back into a bag. But if that's going to be the case, it's helping us then identify what are the most critical and important parts of our curriculum, and what was the actual goal when I was creating this assignment, or when I was creating this exam, or when I was creating this course. I think back to my days as an undergrad in music, and I remember going to music history courses, and I was made to memorize all of the death dates and when did Beethoven die, when was he born, when did he write his Seventh Symphony. And I distinctly remember, as I could reach into my pocket and pull out a phone and answer all of those nearly instantly. And I'm really been heartened over the last 20 years to watch music history education evolve to say, the reason we were doing those dates and timelines and things is we wanted to help our students create a broader picture and understand the evolution of the art form that they were trying to learn and grow. And so now that part of the information is so readily available in your pocket at all times with the advent of the internet, the courses themselves changed and had to. And we now do, I think, a far better job of providing assignments and exams and courses that are focused more on the actual thing we were addressing, which was context, evolution, inspiration, influence, all of those things. And for me now, AI is causing us to go back to the drawing board and ask the same questions, which is, if a portion of my curriculum, or if the way I structure an essay or an exam can be replaced by AI, what is the question I'm asking, and how can I work with that student or with my students to find a way in which the actual ideas and core values that I'm trying to create through this process still exist, and the student takes away what I need from them, accepting the fact that AI is there as a tool available for them.
Appreciate that. And I'm going to hand over now the word to Yang Hong to the same question.
Thank you. So actually, first of all, I think I just would like to agree with what Sean has mentioned. So it's really for us to think about what actually the direction moving forward, especially what are the educational goals. Like me personally, I think is very important. Like since AI can do a lot of things, especially the factual things, although it has some bias still, like errors still, I should say that. And bias is always like underlying, as we know. But it has been more efficient and become more accurate, right? So those kind of learning that maybe focus on more lower cognitive or knowledge base, possibly we can have it to be supported by how to support students to work with that. And then we can, as a educator, we can focus on those knowledge or learning that requires higher order thinking or ability development for the students. So I'm not sure whether that's best practices, but I think like my experience that I mentioned, so it's hard, and I'm still in the process of trying to get to gauge like how, while we develop students to work effectively with AI, can we also like help students to develop their critical use, their reflective use of AI. So I think that part will be very, very important, because that's reflect the higher order thinking as well as the skills they need if we know that AI is going to be here and become more and more advanced. So this is one thing. And also the other practices that I've been seeing actually from other like educators or instructors, they actually try to create those AI agents like from the proprietary models and have them to fit them with those assignments and also the knowledge for specific weeks, so that the AI can become the tutor, in some way in order to support students' learning. So that will also be helpful in a way in which like those more lower level questions or more factual questions can be like with the support of AI, the students can gain that knowledge. Then the professor or the instructor, they can actually reduce the time, the office hour to deal with all these kind of questions and focus on deeper learning with the students, right? So yeah, but I want to say that for that one, actually we need to refer back to what actually is the course nature or the content nature, because I don't think that there will be one model that fits all for different content, but it depends on your subjects. So then there will be creative way for us to develop in order to support students to gain the AI skills, as well as like pursuing the more higher cognitive goals, right? And I just want to add one is regarding how we can tell the difference between AI support learning and AI that quiets, replace the learning we care most. I think one thing right now, correct me if I'm wrong, but at least I know that right now, one strength of a human, very important if compared to AI, is the contextual knowledge. So we know our students. So we know what's the environment that students were in and how we define learning. But the AI didn't know that, right? They actually get the data from all over the places. And so when I have a chance to talk with educators and with the experience myself, actually I ask them like, how do you know that students are cheating? They say that if for those like multiple choice answer, probably very hard. right? But if for the essay, something that they can just easily track that. But because AI production sometimes overly perfect, grammatically logical, and so and then when you compare back to the students, you really know that this is not someone that I know in my class. Then you probably can go with and try to. I don't say that this is something that we just directly say that, oh, you are do the cheating, because students are still developing the way on how to live with AI and still try to learn the knowledge, right? So it's a way that we approach to the students and talk to them and understand how they use and how we can promote their use and the AI literacy between that. Yeah, so sorry for taking a long time. Thank you.
Appreciate that. And I'm going to read a really quick comment here in the section. We have also like a comment and a question, and I'm going to read that for you. My primary interest is by Scholar Barzi. He said, my primary interest regards how AI usage bleeds into first-year composition courses. Oftentimes, these require courses English 1010 and English 1020 are taught by graduate students in the English department. A first EMA student will often teach two sections of English 1010 per semester. My concern is that freshmen are being told many conflict thinks about proper AI usage across the various courses. My concern is that AI adoptions in various 100 level courses will result in students failing to develop critical thinking, writing skills in English 10101 and 1021. 1010 and 1020. How do we safeguard the agency of first-year composition instructors and the skill development of freshmen if the other courses are adopting AI? Is navigating various AI policies simply a responsibility that we are expecting freshmen to manage? And I'm going to direct this question to Ben. I think it should be a good idea to Ben to answer this question.
Thanks, Malika. Yeah, it's a great question, and I think maybe it kind of speaks to a lot of what two panelists before me were speaking to about. Essentially, what is the authentic assessment of the learning we're trying to do in a class? We're dealing with this issue where these tools are moving so fast, developing so quickly that it's, we want to make a policy to say, this is what you can do and this is what you can't. But boy, 2 weeks passes and everything has changed. I'm guessing that those of you in the computer science department, things look a lot different now than they did 4 weeks ago. So, trying to chase this around with policy is really difficult. And this is where really us as educators, where we get to shine, right? It's our intuition. How do we create that learning through the right amount of friction, making people do that hard time on task so they can get to the synthesis, to the creativity that really, really demonstrates true learning. And that's going to be different by discipline, right? I mean, I'm assuming computer science, you still want these people to know how to code line by line, right? At least this week. But, a psychologist who maybe wants to be able to make a quick tool to do some data analysis or do a test or whatever. In the past, maybe they needed to, learn Python, learn HTML, whatever. They don't need to do that. And that's really not the point of their program. So it's going to be different. So to your question, Skylar, I think that, the difficult news is here that is this simply a responsibility that we're expecting freshmen to manage? Yes, and they need a lot of help from their instructors. I know that right now there's a lot of, there are a lot of student discipline cases that are going through the university where a professor says, this person used AI and it's cheating, and the student says, but I could do it in my other class and you never told us what we could do and can't do. So a lot of that is kind of that AI literacy that we need for faculty, so that faculty they know what they need to ask for students. And again, that's tough. It changes so fast. But, for 1101, 1102 classes that they are, you need them to learn how to write. Boy, that's tough because ChatGPT, just even the free version, or Claude or Gemini, or even, I suppose Grok's probably just fine at this too, can write a pretty nice college level essay pretty quickly. How do you get to the authentic assessment of learning how to write? Does everybody have to go back to blue books? I don't know. It's a tough problem. But that need to teach the writing in that class is going to just maybe be very different than what they're doing in a music class, in a studio art class, in a psychology class. So I think that this is where we need to change our thinking around it a little bit, whereas faculty, as instructors, we have to be really pretty prescriptive about what is okay and what is not okay, and be able to trust students to understand and follow that. So it's a big ask, maybe not a satisfying answer, but that's how I see it.
Thank you, Ben, for your question on that. And I also would like to thank Skylar for your comment and also your question. I'm going to jump to the next question, which is question 4. Basically, we know that AI can support learning by feedback. We talked already about that. And institutions are already using AI-driven tools for advising, early alerts, scheduling, and even evaluating student work. These systems can increase consistency and efficiency, but they also raise concerns about transparency, error, and the loss of human judgment, especially in higher stakes decisions. And this question is going to be more directed to Steve and Terence. Where should humans always remain in the loop, no matter how accurate or efficient AI becomes, and why those areas specifically?
So I picked this one. I feel like I picked the easy question because the answer, to me at least, is everywhere. Humans should always remain in the loop for pretty much all applications. Our role may become somewhat higher level, but I would never send an email that AI wrote, for example, without reviewing it first at a minimum, right? And that, to me, when I put AI in my syllabus, in some classes I allow more or less use, the first line, or at least very close to the first line, is always the student is responsible for anything they submit. There is no an AI wrote it, blame them. So there should always be a person who's responsible and in the loop. And having said that, the one exception, I would really like an autonomous car where I could put the seat back and go to sleep and just wake up in Seattle. So I say everywhere, but there's the one exception for me. But in general, our role hopefully will or may become sort of higher level, more oversight, but people should always be in the loop.
Appreciate that, Terence. Steve, the same question.
I want to keep it short, and one of the message I think is always stuck in my mind here. It's one of the manual from the 1979 IBM internal training manuals or presentations, and on the cover page of that manuals, it states that a computer can never be held accountable. Therefore, a computer must never make management decisions. So that was on the cover page in the 1979 manual here. So when you think about this one, and it also applies to the artificial intelligence as well, because AI cannot be held accountable, which means that whenever you want to make a decision, whenever there is people's life on the lines, and certainly humans should be in the loop here, and so that kind of a message is stuck in my head, for a very long time, and accountabilities of the AI, I think that's going to be an issue for now. It's going to be an issue for the futures, and I do believe that a human should be in the loop for any decision from the artificial intelligence.
Appreciate that, Steve and Terence. Thank you so much for your answers. And now we're going over to the higher education, which is facing rising costs, staffing shortages, and increasing expectation for scale and personalization. AI is often positioned to do more with less. while also promising innovation and improved student experience. So my question to Katrina and Terence is, these motivations can coexist, but they don't always align. Is AI primarily helping students learn better, helping institutions survive financial and operational pressure, or both can like work together? And what happens when those goals conflict, for example?
So I'm going to again point to these recent studies are showing that about 25% of students feel disengaged with their learning, like in this moment, and AI has not become fully integrated. We know from years of pedagogy research that students build the strongest neural pathways in their learning by engaging in real world learning experiences and simulations. We know that the human element of learning is incredibly important. It's why you can't learn a foreign language super well just watching a TV show. You need like that human interaction element. My concern is that in pushing for heavy AI instruction, we are taking away that human element and we're ignoring years, decades of research that has already told us how students learn the best. We also have to remember, like, our assignments aren't the goal. Like, the outcome of our teaching is not the goal. The goal is teaching our students how to learn, how to critically think, so that they can then become productive individuals, moving forwards. The other thing that I think we need to think about is it's not just on the education side that universities are integrating AI. It is certainly on the admin side. A very recent study just came out of the Brookings Institute that is showing where the highest impact is likely to be in job loss. 86% is estimated, the highest estimated vulnerable group is women, and specifically women in college towns in the Mountain West. So, like, it's at our doorstep. We know who the vulnerable populations are, and they're the people working for us here at the University of Idaho. On top of that, we've also seen that when AI is used to replace humans at a full job level, AI does a really bad job of engaging in complex, multi-step, comprehensive jobs, like to a failure rate of 95 to 97%. So this idea that we could just use AI to fix a resource problem, that AI can be a stand-in for educators, that AI can be a stand-in for clerical admin, the data is telling us no, that's very much so not the case.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Terence, the same question.
Okay. And I guess we've talked a lot about the education side, so I will focus a little bit more on the second half, which had to do with helping institutions survive financial and operational pressures. And there I think the answer is, I don't think AI can help us do more with less. It may help us do more with the same or do more with more. And I think the recent evidence is pretty strong that's saying we're going to implement AI and it's going to allow us to fire a bunch of people. Although it happens, the places that do that generally don't do very well. And the analogy that I tend to make is to the introduction of power tools to the construction industry, right? That's a huge shift in how much people could do when you introduce power saws and pneumatic hammers and so forth. But we didn't see devastation in the construction industry. Instead, we saw bigger buildings being built. And I think it's a nice analogy for two reasons. One, it sort of says, well, we will do more, but with the same, or maybe a lot more with a little more. And also it points out AI tools require extra training, right? You give somebody a power saw who hasn't done any training, they're going to lose fingers. The implications of using these tools without understanding them, without understanding what they're doing, without understanding what they're producing, the effects are going to be much more damaging, which I guess comes back a little bit to the humans have to be in the loop. And to some extent, we have to be well trained in using the tools and to be able to understand what their outputs are. So the other thing that I sometimes say, AI tools are great if you know more than they do. about what it is that you're doing.
I appreciate that. We are almost running out of time. This is a wonderful topic. We have a lot of wonderful panelists and wonderful questions, and also the participants. We're gonna go over to one more question, which is more about our art. Let's go to art. We know that many generative AI tools are trained on massive data set, and in some cases, some artists are really afraid of, taking them their livelihood, and also some copyright kind of issues. This question would be for Cheah and Ben. What role should the universities play in setting ethical boundaries in terms of using generative AI without hurting other people's livelihood, and also like copyright issues? And it's going to be really very quick answer, maybe 1 minute for each, and later we can close this panel. Thank you.
I guess I'll start. Yeah, I mean, this is kind of a sprawling question when we look at for me, the true ethical issues with how this technology arose, how it's been trained, the inability of our courts and legal system to actually, help artists. And so the thing that, I keep coming back to with AI is I don't think universities have the power to shape how this is going to be used in art any more than we've ever had the power to shape how art moves and grows and moves forward. But I will say that from a technological standpoint, like, I'll use my field. If I look at the big technology disruptors that have happened over the course of the last 4 or 5 centuries, right? The invention of the printing press and how that changed the distribution of music, the gramophone and how it, threatened live performances, and then the evolution of recording technology, the radio, and how it made live performances less special, in the eyes of the people at the time. There have always been these threats. And even recently, as the internet came into place and streaming took the livelihood, or at least one of the major sources of revenue for artists, at no point was the creative process under threat. What was under attack or change or evolution or disruption was how we disseminate the art. And so this is, at this point, a fundamentally different question about what is art, what it means to be creative, what it means to be human. And when I look at the current models and I see that they are, if we really boil it down, they're a bunch of training data that was sourced through questionable means and can now be used to repackage things based on a text prompt. Without some kind of extra input, and this kind of goes back to what Terence was inputting, we don't have the ability to move forward as art or be creative. And so I think what we really tackle with this kind of question is, what is the difference between human creativity and art, but also what does it mean to have a livelihood based around being creative? Like, is the amateur now the level playing field that Nate was talking about? Is that amateur now of equal import, and therefore the output is just as good? If we have the 6 #1 hits on the country Billboard artists in the last 2 months have been AI, I don't know. This is rapidly evolving. So I know I went over there, and I want to give
I
Ben.
appreciate that, Cheah, but we are running out of time. I'm sorry, Ben, but we don't have time anymore. It's 3 p.m. and I'd like also to invite everybody who participated to go over the links Sally share with us on giving your feedback on how, about this panel. And to finish, I'd like also to congratulate everyone, every single participant, every single guest, panelist, participant as well, of being here today. Thank you so much. And we didn't go over every single questions. I know some participants didn't speak much, but it happens in this kind of panel. But I think it was really fruitful. Thank you so much for being here today, and have a good rest of your day. This was a great dialogue, and hope to see you soon. And we're gonna have also another session on March 18th, which is gonna be jumping start your skills on generative AI. And I invite you all to participate. Thank you so much, and see you in the next session.